Little girl ran to a Hell's Angel crying, "They locked my mom inside." His reaction stunned all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The afternoon heat hung over the small American town like a heavy blanket, the kind that made engines idle louder and patience wear thin. The Hell's Angel sat astride his motorcycle near the edge of a quiet parking lot, leather vest dark against the sun, eyes scanning nothing in particular. People knew him by reputation alone. They crossed streets when they saw the wings on his back. Parents pulled their children closer. Conversations lowered without anyone admitting why. He had learned to live inside that silence. Then the sound cut through it. Small shoes slapped against pavement. A sharp breath. A cry that did not belong in a place like this. A little girl ran toward him, tears streaking her dusty cheeks, arms pumping with the wild urgency only fear can give a child. She stopped just short of the motorcycle, staring up at the towering figure like she might bolt at any second. Her voice broke as the words spilled out. "They locked my mom inside." For a heartbeat, the world froze. The biker did not move. Not the way people expected, not with anger, not with laughter, not with a threat. His gloved hands tightened on the handlebars as his eyes dropped to the child's shaking face. He saw scraped knees, a torn sleeve, and eyes wide with terror. He also saw something else. Trust. Desperate and misplaced trust, but real all the same. Around them, a few bystanders slowed, curiosity mixing with caution. No one stepped forward. No one reached for a phone. Everyone waited to see what the Hell's Angel would do. The biker swung one leg off the motorcycle and crouched until he was level with the girl. His size made the movement careful, deliberate. His voice came out low and steady, not loud enough for the crowd, just for her. "Where is she?" The girl swallowed hard and pointed down the road toward a row of old buildings that most people avoided after dark. She took a step back as if remembering who he was supposed to be. The biker noticed and softened his tone without changing his words. "You are safe right here. Tell me everything." She spoke in rushed fragments about a locked door, about shouting that stopped, about men she did not know. Each word landed heavier than the last. The biker stood. Leather creaked. The wings on his back caught the light. The watching crowd felt the shift before they understood it. This was no longer a moment to film or whisper about. This was a decision being made. He looked down at the girl and nodded once. "Stay close to me. We are going to your mom." The engine came to life, not roaring, just ready. And in that instant, the image everyone carried of him began to crack, because whatever he was about to do next, it was not what anyone expected. The motorcycle did not surge forward. It did not snarl or announce itself. It simply rolled as the biker guided it with controlled pressure, keeping the speed slow enough for the little girl to stay close at his side. She did not climb onto the bike. Instead, she walked beside him, small hand gripping the edge of his leather vest, as if it were the only solid thing left in her world. Every step she took felt rushed, even though her legs trembled. The people who had been watching moments earlier now pretended to mind their own business, eyes following from behind windshields and storefront glass. No one stopped them. No one asked questions. The biker sensed the weight of those looks pressing into his back, but he did not turn. His attention stayed fixed on the girl and the direction she pointed with short, panicked motions of her arm. They moved down the cracked sidewalk toward a row of aging buildings that leaned slightly with time, structures that once held small businesses and now held little more than shadows and forgotten storage. The air changed as they approached. The smells of oil and dust mixed with something stale and closed off. The girl slowed and her grip tightened. Her breathing became shallow. The biker noticed and adjusted his pace to match hers. He lowered his head just enough so his voice could reach her without carrying. "You are doing good. Keep walking with me. You are not alone." The words were simple but deliberate. He chose them carefully, the same way he once chose his steps in places where mistakes cost lives. The girl nodded without looking up. Her eyes stayed locked on the building ahead. It was a long, narrow structure with faded paint and boarded windows on one side. A metal door sat at the far end, rusted around the edges, the kind of door that was meant to keep things in rather than out. She pointed again, more urgently now. That one. They stopped several yards away. The biker studied the door, the ground around it, the way the light failed to reach the corner where it stood. He listened. At first there was nothing. Then a sound slipped through, faint but unmistakable. A dull thud followed by a muffled voice. It was enough. The biker felt the moment settle into his chest, heavy and familiar. This was the pause before action, the breath before crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. He crouched slightly, so he was closer to the girl's height, his shadow stretching over the pavement. Look at me. She hesitated but then lifted her face. Tears clung to her lashes. Stay right here. Do not move. If anyone comes close, you stay behind me. She nodded quickly, fear mixing with determination. He stood and took measured steps toward the door. Each step drew more sound from inside, the voice growing clearer, strained but alive. The biker placed his hand against the metal. It was warm from the sun, vibrating faintly with movement behind it. He tested the handle. It did not give. He leaned closer, speaking firmly but not loudly. I am here. You are not alone anymore. There was a sharp intake of breath from inside, followed by a weak reply that confirmed what the girl had said was true. The biker straightened and looked back once to check on the child. She stood exactly where he had told her, small fists clenched at her sides, watching him with a mixture of hope and terror. He turned back to the door, shoulders squared. The decision was complete now. Whatever waited on the other side did not matter. What mattered was the child behind him and the woman trapped inside. The world around them seemed to narrow until there was only the door, the sound behind it, and the steady resolve in the biker's stance. He took one breath, planted his feet, and prepared to act, knowing that once this moment passed there would be no returning to the quiet that existed before a little girl ran to him and trusted him with everything. The biker did not rush the door. He did not kick it or strike it in anger. Instead, he stepped back half a pace and let his breathing slow, the way he had learned long before when reacting too fast made situations worse. His eyes moved over the metal surface, the hinges, the frame, the ground beneath it. Years on the road and years dealing with trouble had taught him to read details others missed. The door was old but reinforced. The lock was cheap but newly installed. Someone had not planned this carefully. Someone had planned it quickly. That mattered. He raised one hand, palm open, and spoke again toward the door, his voice steady and controlled. You can hear me. I need you to stay calm. I am right here. From inside came a strained reply, weak but clear enough to confirm the woman was conscious and frightened rather than injured. The biker nodded to himself. He turned his head slightly and checked on the little girl without fully turning away from the door. She stood exactly where he had told her, small body rigid, eyes fixed on his back as if looking away might make him disappear. He lowered his voice again, so only she could hear. You are doing exactly what you should. Keep watching me. The reassurance seemed to steady her just enough. She nodded once, biting her lip. The biker faced the door again and tested the handle a second time, this time applying pressure in a different direction. The metal creaked, but held. He felt a familiar pull in his chest, a warning from experience that brute force would only escalate things too quickly. This was not about proving strength. This was about ending the danger without creating a new one. He leaned closer and listened again. Footsteps moved inside. Another voice joined the first, sharper and more panicked. Someone else was there. The biker straightened fully now, shoulders broad, presence impossible to ignore. He raised his voice just enough to carry through the metal. This ends now. Open the door. There was a pause. Silence stretched thin. Then a muffled response came back, defensive and uncertain, the kind of sound made by someone who did not expect to be challenged. The biker did not argue. He did not threaten. He simply reached into his vest and pulled out his phone. He held it up where the door could not see it, but the little girl could. He wanted her to understand that help took many forms. He spoke again, measured and calm. I am calling this in. You can open the door and walk away, or this gets much harder. Another pause followed. The air felt heavy, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The biker kept his stance relaxed but ready, feet planted shoulder-width apart, body angled to shield the child behind him. His mind moved quickly through possibilities, always circling back to the same priority. Keep the child safe. Keep the woman alive. Everything else was secondary. The silence broke with the scrape of metal against metal. The lock shifted. The door did not open fully, but it moved enough to show hesitation on the other side. A face appeared briefly through the gap, eyes wide with surprise at the sight of the biker standing there, unmoved and unafraid. The biker did not step forward. He did not need to. His presence filled the space on its own. He spoke one last time, voice firm but controlled. "Step back. Unlock it all the way." The person inside hesitated, then retreated out of sight. The sounds that followed were hurried and uncoordinated. The biker glanced back once more at the little girl. She had not moved. Her trust had not wavered. That trust settled into him like a weight and a promise all at once. The lock finally clicked free. The door swung open just enough to reveal the dim interior and the woman inside, pressed back against a wall, eyes wide with disbelief. Relief washed over her face as she saw the biker and then her child behind him. The biker lifted one hand, signaling everyone to stop where they were. He was not finished yet. This moment was fragile. One wrong move could shatter it. He stepped forward just enough to block the doorway fully, a barrier made of leather and resolve. His voice dropped again, calm but absolute. "Nobody moves until she comes out safely." In that instant it became clear to everyone present that whatever reputation the Hell's Angel carried on the road, it did not define what he chose to be in this moment. He had seen the danger, measured it, and stepped into it without hesitation. And the little girl behind him knew she had chosen the right person to run to. The woman did not move at first. Even with the door partially open and fresh air cutting into the stale space around her, she stayed pressed against the wall, as if it might disappear if she stepped away. Her eyes kept shifting between the biker and the little girl behind him, unable to decide which fear was greater. The biker noticed immediately. He did not step closer. He did not reach out. He understood this reaction well. He had seen it before in people who had been cornered too long. His size filled the doorway, and his presence alone was enough to freeze her in place. He lowered his shoulders slightly and took a slow step back, creating space without turning his back. "You are safe right now," he said calmly, keeping his voice level and low. "I am not coming any closer." The woman swallowed hard. Her breathing was fast and shallow, and her hands shook at her sides. She nodded once, but did not move. Behind him, the little girl took a step forward, then stopped herself, remembering his instruction. Her small face twisted with confusion and fear. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely carrying. The sound cut through the tension sharper than any threat could have. The woman flinched, then leaned forward just enough to see her child clearly. Tears spilled down her face as recognition fully settled in. She shook her head slowly as if warning the child to stay back. The biker understood then that the fear was not only about what had already happened. It was about what she thought might happen next. He turned his head just enough to address the child without looking away from the doorway. "Stay right there," he said gently. "She can see you. That is good. Let her come when she is ready." The little girl nodded, even though her legs trembled. She folded her arms around herself, trying to be brave. The biker shifted his weight and placed one hand flat against the outside wall, steadying himself and signaling that he was not about to rush in. He spoke again, slower this time. "Nobody here is going to hurt you. Your daughter did the right thing. She came for help." That was enough to crack something inside the woman. Her shoulders sagged and a quiet sound escaped her throat somewhere between a sob and a breath. She slid one foot forward, then stopped again, her eyes darting to the darker corner behind her, where another figure remained just out of view. The biker caught the movement. His body angled subtly, creating a clearer barrier between the woman and whatever waited inside. "You can come out now," he said. "Focus on her. Keep your eyes on your daughter." The woman hesitated, then took another step. The distance between her and the door felt longer than it was. Each step carried the weight of uncertainty. She was close enough now that the biker could see the marks on her wrists, faint but unmistakable. He did not comment. He did not react outwardly. He knew better than to draw attention to them in front of the child. The little girl could not contain herself any longer. She ran forward, stopping just short of the biker and reaching out with both hands. The biker moved instantly, not forward, not back, but sideways, giving the woman a clear path. Mother and daughter collided in a tight, desperate embrace. The woman dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around the child, as if trying to shield her from the entire world. She sobbed openly, now burying her face in the child's hair. The biker turned slightly away, giving them privacy, while still blocking the doorway. He raised one hand without looking back, signaling anyone inside to stay put. The woman looked up at him, through tears, her fear still present, but softened by gratitude and confusion. She studied his face, the scars, the hardened lines, the calm eyes. "You are not who I thought you were," she said quietly. He met her gaze briefly, then looked away. "People usually get that wrong," he replied. "Right now, all that matters is getting you both out of here." The woman nodded, gripping her child tighter. The little girl looked up at the biker, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and lingering fear. "Are you going to leave?" she asked. The biker paused, then shook his head once. "Not yet," he said. "Not until this is finished." In that moment, the fear in both mother and child shifted. It did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became something closer to cautious hope. And the crowd outside the building, though still distant, could sense it too. Something irreversible had happened. A line had been crossed, not with violence, but with restraint. And the image of the feared Hell's Angel standing guard while a frightened family reunited would stay with everyone who witnessed it far longer than any rumor ever could. The biker remained where he was for a moment longer, allowing the mother and child to hold each other without interruption. He kept his body angled between them, in the open doorway, his stance relaxed but unyielding. When the woman finally lifted her head, her breathing had slowed, though her hands still trembled. The biker waited until her eyes met his before speaking again. His voice was calm, measured, and free of urgency. "You are safe right now. Nothing is going to happen to you, or your daughter." The woman nodded, though uncertainty still flickered across her face. She glanced past him toward the interior of the building, then back to the open space outside. The biker noticed the hesitation and adjusted without comment. He stepped half a pace farther from the door, widening the gap and making his presence feel less enclosing. He crouched slightly again, lowering himself closer to her eye level. "Take your time," he said. "There is no rush." The little girl tightened her arms around her mother, then looked up at the biker. Her fear had not vanished, but curiosity had begun to push through it. She studied the heavy boots, the leather vest, the weathered hands that had not shaken even once. "You are big," she said softly. The biker nodded. "I know," he replied. His tone carried no offense, only quiet acceptance. The girl hesitated, then asked another question, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you mad?" The biker shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I am not mad. I am here to help." The simplicity of the answer seemed to ease something in her. She rested her head against her mother's shoulder, but kept watching him. The woman took a careful breath and spoke for the first time since stepping outside. "I did not know who else to trust," she said. Her voice was raw from strain and fear. The biker nodded, once acknowledging the weight of her words. "You trusted the right instinct," he replied. "Your daughter did exactly what she needed to do." The woman looked down at the child, her expression breaking again with gratitude and pain. She pressed her forehead against the little girl's hair and whispered words meant only for her. The biker turned his head slightly, giving them space, but staying alert. He could feel the tension still coiled inside the building behind him. This was not finished yet. He straightened and addressed the woman again. "When you are ready, we are going to move away from this door. You will stay close to me, and we will take this one step at a time." The woman nodded again, more firmly now. She shifted her weight and stood with effort, keeping one arm wrapped protectively around her daughter. The biker extended one hand not toward her, but toward the open space beside him, indicating where to move. She followed the gesture, stepping carefully into the light outside. As she did, the sounds from inside the building changed. A sharp movement. A scuffed footstep. The biker reacted instantly, positioning himself fully between the doorway and the family. His voice remained calm, but carried a new firmness. "Stay where you are," he said, toward the interior. "Nobody else comes out." The command was clear and final. He felt the woman tense behind him and placed one hand out to the side, without looking back, a silent signal to stay close. She understood and stayed still. The little girl pressed herself against her mother, but did not cry. She had learned quickly that this man noticed everything. The biker waited several seconds, listening. When no further movement came, he turned his attention back to them. "You did nothing wrong," he said to the woman. "Sometimes danger comes from places we do not expect. That does not mean you failed." The woman swallowed hard and nodded, tears streaming freely now that the worst of the fear had passed. "Thank you," she said quietly. The biker accepted the words with a brief nod. "We are not done yet," he replied. "But you are not alone anymore." He guided them a few steps farther away from the building, positioning them near the edge of the sidewalk where the open street lay beyond. He remained close enough to shield them if needed, but far enough to let them breathe. The little girl looked up at him again, her eyes searching his face. Will you stay? She asked softly. The biker did not hesitate. Yes, he said. I will stay. The answer settled into the air like a promise. Around them the quiet street seemed to hold still, as if aware that something important was unfolding. The biker stood watch steady and unflinching while a frightened family gathered itself behind him. In that space between fear and safety, a fragile trust took root, built not on words or reputation, but on calm presence and choices made without hesitation. And for the first time since the door had closed behind her, the woman allowed herself to believe that they would walk away from this together. The biker felt the shift before he heard it. A change in the air behind him, the kind that came when fear turned into desperation. He raised one hand slowly, palm outward, signaling the woman and child to stay where they were. His voice remained calm, but carried a warning edge. Stay behind me. Do not move. The woman tightened her hold on her daughter, but nodded. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's side, yet kept one eye open, watching the biker with complete focus. From inside the building came a sudden sharp noise, the scrape of something heavy being dragged across concrete. The biker took one measured step forward, placing himself squarely between the doorway and the family. He did not rush. He did not shout. He knew that panic fed on reaction. He spoke toward the interior, his voice steady and controlled. This does not get better for you. Stop where you are. For a moment there was no response. Then footsteps moved closer, uneven and rushed. The biker adjusted his stance, feet planted firm, shoulders squared. He had stood like this before, facing down situations that could explode if mishandled. The difference now was the small presence behind him, the child whose trust he carried like armor. The figure inside the building edged into view, but did not fully step out. The biker kept his hands visible, not raised. Not clenched, simply ready. You step back inside and sit down, he said. Nobody needs to get hurt today. The figure hesitated, breathing hard, eyes flicking past the biker toward the street. The biker noticed and shifted slightly, blocking the line of sight. His body language was clear. There was no path through him. Behind him the woman's breath caught. She recognized the posture, the tone, the moment where things could turn dangerous. The biker spoke again, slower now. You are not in control anymore. Walk back inside. Sit down. The silence stretched. The tension was thick enough to feel. Then the figure retreated, footsteps fading back into the shadows. The biker did not move for several seconds. He listened until he was certain the immediate threat had passed. Only then did he exhale. He turned his head slightly and spoke to the woman without taking his eyes fully off the doorway. Are you able to walk? She nodded, though her legs shook. He stepped back toward them just enough to close the distance. We are going to move farther away from this building, he said. I will stay between you and that door the entire time. The woman swallowed and nodded again. The little girl looked up at him, her voice small but clear. Are they gone? The biker knelt briefly so he was closer to her height. They are not going anywhere, he said. And neither are you. That seemed to comfort her. She reached out and grabbed the edge of his vest again, the same way she had earlier. He allowed it. Together they moved down the sidewalk, slow and deliberate. Each step carried them farther from the door and closer to open space. The biker kept scanning the surroundings, noting parked cars, distant faces, possible exits. He guided them to a spot near the curb where sunlight reached fully, where nothing blocked the view. There he stopped. The woman leaned against a nearby post, steadying herself. The biker turned slightly, so he could face both her and the building at once. He reached into his vest again, and this time did bring out his phone. He did not rush. He made the call with calm precision, speaking clearly, giving location and situation without exaggeration. When he ended the call, he looked back at the woman. Help is on the way, he said. You did the right thing by surviving. Your daughter did the right thing by finding help. The woman's eyes filled again, but this time with relief rather than fear. She nodded repeatedly, unable to speak. The little girl tugged gently on the biker's vest. Are you in trouble? She asked. The biker shook his head. No, he replied. Not for this. The answer made her smile faintly for the first time. She rested her head against her mother again, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. The biker remained standing, vigilant, a silent wall between the family and the danger they had escaped. In that moment the noise of the street returned, distant engines, footsteps, normal life resuming around an extraordinary pause. The biker did not relax. He stayed exactly where he was, grounded and watchful, until he saw the first sign of approaching help in the distance. Only then did he allow himself a small shift of weight, a subtle release of tension. The choice he had made earlier now felt complete. He had not acted out of anger or reputation. He had acted because a child had trusted him, and that was something he would not betray. The distant sound of approaching sirens did not bring relief the way the woman expected. Instead, it triggered a new wave of tension that rolled through her shoulders and tightened her grip on her daughter. The biker noticed immediately. He read the change in her posture the same way he had read the door and the shadows inside the building. He turned slightly, so his body still shielded them while his voice stayed calm. "Help is coming," he said. "That is a good thing." The woman nodded, but her eyes drifted back toward the building as if something inside was pulling at her thoughts. She swallowed and spoke quietly. "They said if I left it would get worse." Doors slammed somewhere inside the building, followed by raised voices. The biker felt the moment tighten again. This was the kind of twist that came when people realized control had slipped away. He shifted his stance, widening his base and placing one arm slightly behind him as a barrier. The woman leaned closer to him without thinking, trusting the space he created. From the corner of the building, another figure emerged into view, moving fast and looking toward the street. The biker did not turn fully. He kept his eyes forward, but adjusted enough to block any path toward the family. His voice carried without rising. "Stop right there." The figure froze, unsure and clearly startled by the sight of him standing firm and unmoved. The biker did not advance. He did not threaten. He simply held the line. "You walk back inside and sit down," he said again. The figure hesitated, then glanced toward the sound of sirens now close enough to echo off the buildings. The biker saw the calculation in the movement. He took one deliberate step forward, just enough to make it clear that running past him was not an option. The figure retreated back inside, muttering under their breath. The biker waited until the sounds faded again. The little girl clutched his vest tighter than before. "Are they mad at you?" she asked softly. The biker shook his head. "They are mad because they lost control," he said. "That happens sometimes when people do the wrong thing." The girl considered this and nodded as if it made sense. The woman let out a shaky breath and leaned against the post again. "I thought no one would come," she said quietly. The biker looked at her for a moment, then answered. "Someone always comes when a child asks for help," he said. "Sometimes it just takes a while." The sirens finally came into view at the end of the street, red and blue lights flashing against the faded storefronts. A small crowd had begun to gather at a distance, drawn by noise and curiosity. People whispered and pointed, some at the building, some at the biker. He ignored them all. His focus stayed on the family. As the first responders pulled up, the biker raised one hand to signal where they were. He spoke clearly and calmly when approached, giving a straightforward account without emotion or exaggeration. The woman stayed silent, holding her daughter close. The little girl peeked out from behind her mother, watching everything with wide eyes. When one responder crouched to her level and spoke gently, she did not pull away. The biker noticed and felt a quiet sense of relief. The immediate danger was passing, but the weight of what had happened lingered. The woman finally looked at him again, her eyes searching his face. "You stayed," she said. The biker nodded. "I told her I would," he replied. The little girl smiled faintly at that and rested her head against her mother once more. As officers moved toward the building, the biker stepped slightly aside, but remained close enough to be seen. He did not insert himself further. His role was not to take over, but to ensure the promise he had made was kept. The scene around them grew louder, more active, but the small space where the family stood felt strangely calm. The twist was not that help arrived. It was that the feared biker never left their side, even when others took control. And that choice began to change the way everyone watching understood what they were seeing. The moment the responders took positions, the tension shifted again, but this time inward. The woman stood holding her child while listening to instructions and nodding when asked simple questions. The biker remained close enough to be seen, but far enough to avoid crowding them. He watched the little girl closely. Her body was still, but her eyes followed every movement around them. She had not cried since they left the doorway, and that worried him more than tears would have. Children went quiet when they were processing something too large for their age. He knelt a short distance away and lowered himself to her level without touching. He spoke gently and steadily, telling her that she had done something very brave and that her mother was safe because of it. The girl listened without speaking, then asked if her mother was going to be taken away. The biker answered honestly and calmly that her mother was going to talk to people whose job was to help, and that she would not be alone. That answer seemed to ease the tightness in the child's shoulders. She leaned into her mother and closed her eyes for a moment. The woman looked at the biker with a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. She asked quietly if he planned to leave. He told her not yet, and explained that he would stay until she felt steady and until the situation was fully clear. She nodded and took a deeper breath. As officers moved toward the building, voices rose briefly, then settled. The biker could tell from the way the responders moved that they were being careful. This was not a Russian situation. It was a controlled one. That mattered. The woman shifted her weight and winced slightly. One responder noticed and asked if she was hurt. She hesitated, then shook her head and said she was just tired. The biker caught the hesitation. He knew that look too. He spoke up calmly and suggested that someone check her wrists and arms where the marks had been earlier. The woman looked surprised but did not object. When the responder nodded and followed through, the woman exhaled as if releasing a held breath. She realized then that this man was still watching out for details even now. The little girl opened her eyes again and watched as her mother was gently examined. She asked the biker if he was going to get in trouble. He smiled slightly and told her that sometimes doing the right thing looked scary, but it did not mean it was wrong. She thought about that and then nodded. The crowd at the edge of the street murmured quietly. Some people stared at the biker vest and patches, then looked away embarrassed. Others watched the family with concern. The biker ignored all of it. His attention stayed where it belonged. The woman finished answering questions and was given a blanket. She wrapped it around herself and her daughter. The simple act brought visible relief. She looked at the biker again and thanked him without raising her voice. He accepted the thanks with a nod and told her she had protected her child by trusting her instincts. The little girl tugged on his vest once more and asked his name. He told her simply and asked hers in return. She shared it shyly. He repeated it once, so she knew he had heard. The exchange grounded her. It made him real rather than a frightening shape. As time passed, the urgency eased into a steady rhythm of procedure. The biker felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. He had stayed because he promised, but also because he recognized the moment when a person needed a familiar presence more than answers. The woman and child both seemed calmer now. The girl even yawned and rested her head on her mother's shoulder. The biker remained standing, watchful, but no longer tense. He knew the worst moment had passed. The twist in this part of the story was not sudden danger or dramatic action. It was the quiet realization shared by everyone there that safety had come not from force, but from patience and presence. The little girl had run to a man others feared and found exactly what she needed. And the man stayed not for praise or recognition, but because leaving too soon would have broken something fragile that had just begun to heal. As the scene settled into a quieter rhythm, the next step became unavoidable and heavier than all that came before. One of the responders approached the woman and explained calmly that she would need to go with them for further care and to give a statement in a safer place. The woman listened with a distant look as if the words were arriving through water. When she nodded, it was slow and uncertain. The biker watched her closely and saw the moment fear returned, not as panic, but as exhaustion. The little girl sensed it too and tightened her hold around her mother's waist. She asked softly if they were going somewhere far away. The responder answered gently that they were only going a short distance and that it was to help make sure everything would be all right. The girl looked at the biker again, searching his face for confirmation. He knelt slightly so she could see his eyes clearly and told her that this was part of being safe and that her mother would not be alone. That seemed to steady her enough to nod. The responders prepared to move them and brought the vehicle closer. The woman hesitated at the open door and looked back toward the building one last time, as if expecting something to change. The biker noticed and stepped closer without touching. He spoke quietly and firmly, telling her that what was behind that door no longer had power over her. He reminded her that she had walked out, and that mattered. The woman closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve and stepped forward. The little girl climbed in beside her, still holding the edge of the blanket. Before the door closed, she leaned out slightly and looked at the biker. She asked if he would still be there when they came back. The question carried more weight than her age should have held. The biker did not answer quickly. He understood that promises mattered more now than ever. He told her that he would not disappear, and that even if she did not see him again, she should remember that she was never wrong to ask for help. The girl nodded as if storing the words somewhere safe. The door closed gently, and the vehicle prepared to move. The woman pressed her hand against the glass, and the biker raised his hand in return, a simple acknowledgement rather than a dramatic goodbye. As the vehicle pulled away, the street felt suddenly emptier. The crowd began to thin out, murmurs fading into normal traffic sounds. Responders continued their work inside the building and around the area, but the center of gravity had shifted. The biker stood alone near the curb, watching until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared from view. Only then did he allow himself to exhale fully. One of the responders approached him and thanked him briefly for staying calm and helping keep the situation contained. The biker nodded and replied that the child did most of the work by being brave. The responder paused at that, then nodded in agreement. The biker looked back toward the building where officers were still moving in and out. He felt the familiar pull to leave before questions or attention followed. But he stayed a few minutes longer, making sure there was no chance the family would need him again. The weight of the moment settled slowly into his chest, not as adrenaline, but as something quieter and deeper. He thought about the look in the little girl's eyes when she first ran to him, and how quickly trust had formed where fear should have been. That stayed with him. When everything finally seemed stable, he walked back toward his motorcycle. The street looked the same as it had earlier, yet it felt different. A few people watched him now with expressions that were not wary but thoughtful. He ignored them and focused on the familiar motions of preparing to leave. As he mounted the bike, he paused for a moment, hands resting on the handlebars. He realized that the story was not finished for the family, and it was not finished for him either. Some moments followed a person long after the sound faded. This was one of those moments. He started the engine and rolled away at a steady pace, not fast and not slow. The building receded behind him, and the road opened ahead. What stayed was the knowledge that a child had trusted him and that he had not walked away. That knowledge would shape what came next, even if no one ever knew his name. The ride away from the street was quiet, but not empty. The biker kept his speed steady, letting the familiar vibration of the motorcycle ground him while his mind replayed the events he had just left behind. He did not go far. A few blocks down, he pulled over near a small overlook where the town dipped into open road and parked the bike. He shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still on the grips, eyes fixed ahead. This was usually the point where he would leave things behind and keep moving. Tonight was different. The image of the little girl pressing her hand against the glass stayed with him. He reached into his vest and pulled out his phone, checking it without fully knowing why. There was no message, no call. Still he waited. After a short while, he swung back onto the bike and headed toward a diner on the edge of town, a place truckers and locals shared without asking questions. Inside, the lights were warm and the smell of coffee hung in the air. He took a booth near the window where he could see his motorcycle. As he waited for his order, he noticed the television above the counter, showing a brief local update about an incident resolved peacefully with no injuries reported. The details were thin, but the image of the building flashed across the screen. A few patrons glanced at him, then back at their plates. No one said anything. He finished his coffee slowly, then stood and paid. As he stepped outside, his phone vibrated in his hand. The number was unfamiliar. He hesitated only a second before answering. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and cautious. The caller identified themselves as part of the response team and explained that the woman and her daughter were safe and being cared for. The biker listened without interrupting. He felt a tightness ease in his chest that he had not fully acknowledged until now. The caller added that the little girl had asked if the man with the motorcycle was all right. The biker closed his eyes briefly and nodded, even though the caller could not see him. He asked simply if they were okay. The answer was yes. That was enough. He ended the call and stood still for a moment, the night air cool against his face. He realized then that the outcome mattered more than recognition or closure. Knowing they were safe was the payoff. He mounted the bike again and rode toward the edge of town where the road opened wide and the lights thinned out. As he rode, he thought about how easily things could have gone another way. How one moment of hesitation could have changed everything. He remembered the fear in the woman's eyes and how it had shifted when she realized he was not there to judge or dominate, but to stand between her and harm. That realization stayed with him. Several miles out, he slowed and pulled off near a rest area overlooking a stretch of highway glowing under the stars. He cut the engine and leaned back against the seat, listening to the quiet. He knew that this was not the end of the story for the family and not the end for him either. Some choices followed a person forward, shaping the next ones whether they wanted it or not. He thought about the promise he had made to the little girl not in words, but in presence. That promise now felt heavier than any patch or reputation he carried. After a while he stood and stretched, then looked back down the road toward town one last time. He did not regret staying. He did not regret getting involved. He only regretted that it had taken a child running toward him in fear to remind him of something he had always known. That strength meant little without restraint, and that protection was a choice made again and again. He turned the bike back on and merged onto the highway, riding into the night steady and unhurried, carrying with him the quiet knowledge that sometimes the most powerful reaction was simply refusing to walk away. The following morning arrived quietly, with pale light stretching across the highway as the biker rode back toward town. He had not planned to return so soon, yet something pulled him back, a feeling that the story had not fully closed. He slowed as familiar streets came into view and parked near the same diner from the night before. Inside, the rhythm of morning had replaced the tension of the previous evening. Coffee cups clinked and voices carried easy conversation. He took a seat by the window again and ordered without looking at the menu. While he waited, his phone vibrated softly. This time the number was the same as before. He answered and listened. The voice on the other end told him that the woman had rested and that the child had slept through the night. No injuries required further care. The situation inside the building had been handled, and there was no longer any risk. The biker closed his eyes briefly as the weight finally lifted. He thanked the caller and ended the call without adding anything else. Thought about how easily fear hid behind ordinary walls. As he started the engine, he noticed a familiar figure across the street. The woman stood there holding her daughter's hand. They had spotted him at the same moment. For a brief second, no one moved. Then the child broke free and ran toward him. He shut off the engine and knelt just in time to catch her as she wrapped her arms around his neck. The woman followed more slowly, tears already forming in her eyes. The biker held the child, gently, aware of how fragile and strong she was all at once. She pulled back and looked at him with a serious expression. "You stayed," she said. The biker nodded. "I said I would," he replied. The woman reached them and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. She thanked him again, this time with steadier voice. She said that the child had been asking to see him. The biker glanced down at the girl and smiled faintly. "You were very brave," he said. The girl shrugged as if it were obvious. "I just ran," she answered. The simplicity of it struck him. Sometimes courage looked exactly like that. The woman explained that they were on their way to stay with family and that things would be different now. The biker listened and nodded. He did not offer advice or promises. He simply told her that if she ever needed help again, she should trust the same instinct that had guided her child. The woman agreed and squeezed her daughter's hand. The girl reached out and touched the patch on his vest, then looked up at him. "Are you scary?" she asked. The biker considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "but not when it matters." She smiled at that and stepped back beside her mother. They said goodbye without drama or lingering sadness. As they walked away, the biker felt something settle into place inside him. This was the payoff, not applause or recognition, but the quiet knowledge that a family was walking forward safer than before. He started the bike again and rode away as the morning traffic flowed around him. The road stretched open and familiar ahead. He did not know where he was going next, and for once that felt right. What he did know was that the reaction that stunned everyone had not been a single moment. It had been a series of choices made calmly and without hesitation. And that was something he would carry with him long after the sound of engines faded. Days passed, and the town slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but the ripple from that afternoon did not disappear. The biker rode through neighboring roads and small highways, yet his thoughts kept circling back to the same moment when a child chose him without knowing his past or his name. He found himself more observant than usual, noticing how people moved, how fear and kindness often lived close together. At a gas station outside town, a man recognized the vest and stepped aside, but then hesitated and nodded in quiet respect. At a roadside stop, a woman held the door open a second longer than necessary and thanked him for helping someone. Word had traveled in fragments, not as a story told cleanly, but as pieces carried by those who witnessed it. He did not correct them or add details. He understood that sometimes truth moved best without explanation. One afternoon, he received another call from the same number as before. The voice told him that the woman and her daughter had settled safely with family and that the child had started asking questions about motorcycles and roads. The biker smiled to himself and said nothing more than that he was glad they were well. When the call ended, he sat on the edge of his bed for a long time staring at the floor. He realized that something in him had shifted quietly but permanently. For years he had believed distance was protection and that leaving before things became personal was the safest path. Now he understood that staying had its own kind of strength. He thought about the way the little girl had run without stopping and how the decision had been hers alone. That courage had changed the course of several lives in a matter of minutes. The biker found himself stopping less often and watching more closely when he rode through towns. He paid attention to places others avoided and to people who looked as though they were waiting for someone to notice them. It was not a mission or a vow. It was simply awareness. One evening as the sun dipped low, he parked near a quiet stretch of road and sat with the engine off, listening to the wind move through dry grass. He considered how easily the moment could have ended differently if he had turned away or dismissed the child as someone else's problem. That thought stayed with him like a warning and a guide. He knew the world would continue to judge him by his appearance and his choices from long ago. That did not bother him the way it once had. What mattered now was how he responded when it counted. Somewhere miles away, a little girl slept peacefully, knowing that when she ran toward help it came. That knowledge grounded him more than any destination. As night settled in, he started the motorcycle and rode on, carrying the quiet understanding that this was not the end of the story, but the opening of something new. He did not know what form it would take, and he did not need to. The road would reveal it in time. What he did know was that a single act of presence had changed everything, and that sometimes the most powerful moments happened without witnesses or applause. They lived on in the choices made afterward. And as the miles rolled beneath him, he carried that truth forward, ready for whatever moment might come next. The road stretched ahead, winding through quiet towns and open fields. The biker had been riding for hours now, the steady hum of the engine beneath him a familiar comfort. As the miles passed, he realized that the weight of the past days had not been a burden but a reminder. It had shifted something inside him, something deeper than the instinct to protect or the desire to remain detached. What had started as a simple act of responding to a child in need had turned into a lasting reflection on what it meant to truly stand for someone, not just in moments of crisis, but in the small, everyday choices. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, he found himself slowing his pace, not because the road had become unfamiliar, but because the journey itself had taken on new meaning. He thought about the little girl again. How her eyes had searched his face for reassurance, how she had trusted him without hesitation. And then he thought about her mother, how her guardedness had cracked when she saw that there was no judgment in his stance, only a quiet, unwavering commitment to help. The biker didn't know what the future held for them, or what kind of path they would walk, but he did know that the trust they had placed in him, however small, was enough to keep him moving forward, one step at a time. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to the present. He pulled over to the side of the road and answered the call. It was a familiar voice, one he hadn't expected to hear again so soon. The woman's voice was calm, steady, but there was something else there, relief. She thanked him again, this time with more weight, more conviction. She told him that her daughter had begun to draw pictures of the motorcycle, asking questions about the roads, the places they had yet to go. She said that her daughter was already starting to look forward to the future, a future that seemed brighter now. The biker sat in silence for a moment, taking in the words. He didn't know what to say, but he didn't need to. She was okay. They were both okay. That was all that mattered. When the call ended, he put the phone down and took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the open road fill his thoughts. The sky had darkened further, the stars beginning to shine above, and the air felt cooler now, a signal that the night was fully here. He started the bike again, feeling the rumble beneath him as he turned back toward the open road. There were no grand gestures left to make, no final act of heroism needed. What had been done, what had been chosen, had already changed the course of everything. The biker knew, without needing to say a word, that the journey ahead would still be uncertain, but it would no longer be a road taken alone. His role had been simple, yet profound: to show up, to listen, and to be present when it mattered most. And now, as the headlights carved a path through the darkening night, he felt that he was not just riding for the next destination, but for something deeper. He rode for the silent promise made in a moment of need, a promise that would linger in the distance long after the sound of the engine had faded. There was no need for a conclusion, no need to tie everything up neatly. The story had already unfolded, and the journey would continue as long as he kept moving forward. The road stretched out in front of him, and with it, the endless possibilities of what could come next. In these captivating Hell Angels stories, we explore the journey of a biker who answers the call for help when a frightened little girl runs to him, crying that her mother is locked inside. What follows is a series of unexpected events that reveal the true meaning of strength and protection, as the biker's presence makes a lasting impact on a vulnerable family. Hell Angels stories often focus on the rough exterior and the myth of danger, but this story dives into the heart of a man who proves that courage is not about brute force, but standing by those who need it the most. As the story unfolds, the biker's commitment to his promise to the little girl becomes the central theme, reminding us that actions speak louder than words. The story captures the essence of what it means to show up in moments of crisis and the powerful bonds that form when trust is placed in the right person. By the end of this Hell Angels story, the biker's quiet strength transforms the lives of the mother and child, demonstrating that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never expect to be called to action. These Hell Angels stories remind us that the road to redemption and change is often paved by those who are willing to step up, not for recognition, but for the simple act of protecting others. As the biker rides away, the memory of his actions lingers, leaving a deep impression that stays long after the story ends.